You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Hi, and welcome to Sustainably Geeky. This is episode 34, and this is a bonus episode where we talk to the guest we had on our last episode, Nina Munteanu, who is a limnologist, but as we mentioned, she's also a cli-fi author. And Jen and I are here to discuss one of her books called A Diary in the Age of Water, which we read over the last month since we talked to her, and we are going to discuss that book today. So Nina, thank you for coming back and joining us to talk about this awesome book with us.
Well, pleasure to be here.
So to kind of give you guys a background and to give you guys a little bit of a background about the book, it takes place in the future, and we are introduced to Kaio, who is a humanoid with 4 arms and blue skin, and she has dreams basically of life before her, where humans were prolific and disasters ruled the world. So she's very curious about the humans and what became of them and how she came into being, and all of her sisters who were like her. And so we meet her when she's undergoing like a rite of passage in which she has to leave her homeland and basically pick a book from this sacred library and learn it and memorize it. So she ends up finding the diary of a limnologist from the time period that she's so curious about. And that's kind of where the bulk of the book takes off. She's reading this woman's diary, and she starts to get a lot of her questions answered. And, you know, it's a very fascinating look at what the world could be if we don't get this climate change thing under control. So I'll kind of stop there, Nina, and let you tell us a little bit about, you know, what your inspiration was, where the story idea came from for you.
Yeah. Well, it came in a couple of stages. So I was originally asked to write a short story, and it was called, well, basically it was my publisher in Rome asked me to write a short story basically about water and politics. That's what they love over there, politics. But I wanted to write about Canada, and I wanted to write something ironic. So I chose water scarcity in Canada. And this is a nation that's rich in water. As you all know, that we have close to a fifth of the fresh water in the world. So the bilingual story was called The Way of Water, La Natura dell'Acqua, resulted, which has been reprinted actually in a bazillion magazines and anthologies. Thankfully, people liked it. The story was about young Hildy, and this is actually the daughter of the diarist in the novel. Hildy was dying of thirst in Toronto, and the story just kind of begged for more, so the novel came from it. So I basically got into writing more about the mother, and then I framed it with the character, the blue-skinned character Keo, in the far future in the dying boreal forest.
Well, I have to say, I found it fascinating and a very, you know, interesting how you managed to kind of weave everything together and the twists at the end. And I'm always, you know, just in awe of people who can plant seeds of something and then by the end it all comes full circle. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
What were your you know, initial thoughts on the story, and what were your takeaways?
Yeah, I love the idea that, you know, you can weave this story creatively, but also highlight the need, you know, for water scarcity and everything you mentioned. So, you know, again, kudos to you, and maybe there's a movie in your future.
Oh, I'd love to see a movie about that.
The blue like Avatar and like, you know.
It does. I mean, Avatar is all about that sort of thing too, the exploitation of resources without, and it's senseless exploitation, right? It's that kind of not looking forward, not living sustainably, not taking into account a more holistic worldview, a participatory worldview, like the indigenous peoples. And in fact, in that movie, in that work, they bring in the indigenous peoples, and rightly so, because the indigenous peoples have always had that kind of worldview, just like here in Canada and in the States. We need to be looking at the indigenous peoples much more, and understand how they view the world, which is very, very different than our kind of capitalist, exploitive type of view. And what we end up doing is we other the environment. The environment becomes the other, the thing, the no, whatever that we separate ourselves from. So there's self and there's other. And by doing that, we give ourselves permission to wreck it, to destroy it, to use it and abuse it and all those kind of things. And it's that kind of thinking, that kind of, oh gosh, it's, what's that guy's name? I always forget his name. The philosopher from the 1600s who came up with Descartes. It's Cartesian thinking. Descartes came up with this idea that, we are the only ones that have a soul and an intelligence, and animals don't even feel. I mean, sorry, give me a break. Anyway, we've gone beyond that, but we have a ways to go. We have definitely a ways to go.
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating how you weaved in a lot of the folklore from not just the indigenous peoples, but cultures all around the world, and the way that they interact with water, and how it was interesting how you combined that with science. And that was kind of the story, is how do you kind of harness the water using these stories and science. And I'm interested to know, how much research did you have to do for all of that? I mean, there were a lot of religious undertones, a lot of, like I said, we talked about indigenous, groups, and that seems like quite a bit of, research to pull it all together.
Yeah, a lot of Hindu mythology and various other cultural groups and philosophies. And I did a lot of research, but that's sort of my playtime, to be honest. As a scientist, research for us is like for kids playing outside in the playground, where it's our way of really giving ourselves fulfillment by following a curiosity. And that's what researchers do. That's what scientists do. That's what most people do who have an interest, right? We follow our interest and we want to find out more, and we allow our curiosity to take us there. So a lot of the book I spent a lot of time researching. The way I work is I get an idea, I have a premise, which I mentioned already, the idea of water scarcity in Canada, which is a true irony, considering that we're water rich. But obviously the scarcity is a result of politics, right? Politics and corporate greed and a bunch of other things that are coming into play. And so from that, I then need to research more. And then as I research more, I start to cobble together the story. And then it goes back and forth, research, right, research, right, research, right. And that process works for me. And I redefine the story. And in fact, in this particular story with Lina, the major character, the diarist, the limnologist diarist, she plays the bulk of the main role, the bulk of the book. And she's a limnologist who has issues of abandonment. We won't go into why that is, but we find out why. And as a result, she's overly protective of her daughter, who is tending toward being very interested in water as well, but in different ways. And so she, I lost my train of thought there. So in terms of what she does, she writes a diary. So she uses this book, Wetzel, which is a textbook, a major textbook in limnologist. In fact, it's the textbook that I used in my limnology courses. It's a classic, Robert Wetzel. He's still around. And she uses that, a quote from Wetzel in front of each of her entries. And that she uses that to ground her, because she's not well grounded. She has, like I said, issues of abandonment and overly protective, and she's scared of what's going on, but she doesn't want to admit. So there's all kinds of things going on. So she uses Wetzel, she uses science to ground her. So she starts each entry with a quote, and then she has her entry, which, as you can see, sometimes it's ironic to the quote, sometimes it's bang on, sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with the quote, but that's her, right? That's how she's coming through. That's how she's that's her way of meditating. Other people meditate different ways, but that's what a scientist does. So I know I went off the topic there, but I just thought I'd throw that in.
So does that reflect kind of your process when you're writing as well?
You hit on a nail there. I guess it does. There's a lot of me and Lina, probably a lot of the neuroses too. Heaven knows. I have a son. You have to ask my son about that. But anyway, certainly as writers, fiction writers, we always put ourselves in. Literary fiction is actually perhaps the best genre that displays that. Science fiction is more the lit of large, the lit of worlds and big worlds and world building. And it's not as obvious that the writer puts themselves into it, because a lot of science fiction is not as much character-based as event-based or world-based. But fiction that is character-based, that is character-driven, often has to have elements of the writer in there. And of course, the theme of every book is going to be the author's theme, something that's important to the author that comes through and that then plays out in the dramatization of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that the process that she does is similar to yours, starting with science and fact so that you can then open your mind to the creative process of writing your book.
Yeah. You really hit on something. That was brilliant. That was really brilliant. How the limnologist starts with the science and then moves off into her own ramblings. She uses that to center herself. I, as a writer, as a scientific writer, as a science writer, start with the research and still with the science, the concept, and then move from there into the story. So it's kind of funny. What I was going to say earlier, and I lost my track, is that every author has a process that they use, and you've kind of hit on mine, which was really cool. But this is not the way I normally write a book. All my books prior to this one were written to an outline and were written to something that was very connected to something that I knew. I knew the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story, and I wrote to that. This book, I had no idea how it was going to end. So it wrote itself differently. It was more almost like an anastomosing river where it meanders and it goes along, and you don't know which tributary, or it's not a tributary, but which branch you're going to end up in. You know, more or less you're going to end up in the ocean somehow, but you don't quite know how you're going to get there. And that's how I wrote this book for the longest time. And it was a very different process for me. Anyway, yeah, in fact, it got...
You kind of let the research help you write the story.
Yeah, to some extent. In fact, what drove the story were the characters. So I had Kio in the beginning, and then I went into Lina, who's the diarist, and then enter her daughter, Hildy. And then I go back to Kio. So the diarist's story is framed by the Keogh's current state, right, in the far future. Well, when I was writing the diary part, I knew more or less what was going to go on with Keogh. But when I was writing the diary as the diarist, I was doing all this research. And to be honest, I was writing myself into that dark, big black hole that we were talking about earlier before we went on the air. The real world, because this diary is based so much on real events, almost every chapter that you go into, every entry that the diarist makes, I'd say 2/3 of them are based on, more than 2/3 are based on something very real, something that is real currently, a phenomenon that is currently happening, like atmospheric rivers. We talked about them earlier. Climate change, of course, all kinds of terms that she brings up that are really occurring, heavy water and events that have occurred and are occurring. So this research really put me into a downward spiral, and I was going, oh my God, how is she going to get out of this? And the character herself is fairly cynical. She's not an upbeat character. Lina is not. She's very complex. She's driven. She's a good person, but she makes these big mistakes. As you know, we won't talk about them exactly, I suppose. We don't give spoilers, but she makes these big mistakes. And they're caused mostly from, again, her feelings of inadequacy and, that she feels abandoned by her mother, etc., and all these kind of things, insecurities. So I went into a funk, and to be honest, at one point I said, I don't know if I can finish this book, and I don't know where it's going to go. And then I said, I have to save it. I have to save me. Literally, all authors do this, I think. I hope. Anyway, I do. From now on, perhaps. And I spent more time with Hildy. So Hildy grows up and literally took me out of the hole. I don't think I'm giving away too much there, but the point is that all good stories go into a black hole, and the authors take themselves there willingly. But if you haven't written an outline, then you're going blind into it, and you don't know how you're going to get out. So in some ways, this is the first story that I've written that, this way, where the characters actually led me, not the other way around, which is very cool. I was very excited to write this way. It was scary. It was much more scary. But what happened was this organic process occurred that I think if I had done it any other way, it wouldn't have occurred. And Hildy became a different character as a result. The whole story became a different story as a result. And it became very real, which is why I think in some regards I've been getting the kind of reviews that I'm getting for this book that are paradoxical. People are saying it's the scariest and most comforting thing they've read. I mean, that's like, whoa, where's that coming from? And various things like that. It's very disturbing, but it's also very cool, and these types of things are happening. And I think it's because that was my process. I went through that, and it's being reflected. Anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, you kind of touched on this earlier about like the fear, I guess, or the anxiety of the things happening when, they start taking the water and Canada starts losing its water, which seems like an oxymoron. But as I read this, I was so anxious because, of the things actually happening, but also because I can see this happening because of how the actions we're taking now. I mean, we're not managing our resources well. We're not minimizing carbon and methane emissions, and exactly. We are treating nature with, disrespect, and we're just tearing the planet apart. And every entry, it seems to get worse and worse. I mean, you talk about the water, but then you also talk about, how the ecosystems are affected and how the food supply and, everything's a ripple down, trickle down effect. No, it was very easy to get in that downward spiral of, oh my God, this is gonna be us in like 50 or 100 years.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're actually reading a book that has that, this is what makes me curious about other people who are readers, what their take on it is and what motivates them to keep reading. And I think that's the thing, is that I brought those elements in. Even with Lina herself, there were elements of hope that came in. And just, if nothing else, her relationship with her daughter and her need to protect her daughter. And, there was that element that kept people going. Otherwise they'd go, well, to heck with this person, or to heck with this, right? So something kept people going, just like it kept me going as an author, even though all these things were coming through. And there was that thread of hope that kept getting more and more, I don't know, bigger or solid, that allowed people to come through. And I'm betting that there's some elements of curiosity too, like what happens to all the characters, because you really have no idea, right?
Is there a sequel in your future?
Yeah, there is. Actually, there's definitely room for a sequel. It's, in some ways, it's not so much a sequel. Some people are really saying they want a book about Kyo. They really want a book that takes Kyo on her.
That's what I was going to say, her adventures.
Yeah, that people are going, she's my favorite character and you only gave her this much. Come on. So yeah, I'm thinking about that. But this current book that I am writing, that is sort of like a sequel. I don't know what you would call it. An equal? Oh, I just made up a word. Because it takes place in the universe, and it uses one or two of the same characters who were minor characters. They are now major characters. And even the diarist, Lina, is backstage in this one. She's not a character in the book, but she's backstage. Everyone's met her and has interacted with her in some way.
Is it Daniel? I want justice for Daniel. I want justice for
Daniel's
Daniel.
one of them.
Okay.
Oh, good. Well, yeah. I just gave something away. We shouldn't do this.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll warn people.
Okay.
Because there could be spoilers.
Yeah. Because exactly.
Well, that's awesome. I mean,
yeah.
I think it's good though that we'll get to kind of see where the rest of the universe goes, because I know I had a lot of questions about, like you said, well, what happens to them when the diary stops? And we only really see from her viewpoint, although we do get some of Hildy's, and not as much, and not in a direct way. So I do think it'd be interesting to kind of get another viewpoint and see,
That's sort of what I thought too. And I was really anxious to, do the Daniel thing. Anyway, there's no harm in that, I guess. Just because there's a lot of aspects in there that are really interesting. And this book, in fact, is going to take place all across Canada, in Halifax area, in the Arctic, and in BC, in Vancouver, as well as Toronto. So it's all over Canada and some of the north. And it's going to encompass all those elements together. So it's separate stories that then come together and then move toward something else. So I'm very excited about it. It's fun writing it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Notice a theme on our shows in general. Like, we do tend to go down the spiral of despair, and I try to bring it back to optimism. But you have to get down to the bottom of that rabbit hole sometimes to appreciate the hope on the other side and to really see the value of it. Because if you don't feel you don't feel that opposite, negative side, then you can't fully appreciate the hope and
precisely
have her. better.
It's the yin and the yang, right?
Right.
It's the black dot and the white dot and the black. You've got to have them it's that chiaroscuro effect where without the dark, you can't have the light, you can't see the light, etc.
Yeah.
And when I was going through that experience of going through that, into that dark hole, a quote, I can't recall who the quote's by, I'm afraid, but the quote goes like this: if you find yourself in hell, keep moving. Sorry, I really like that. I think it's really funny because essentially that's what if you find yourself, I guess I messed up the quote. The point is when you're moving and you get into a bad place, just keep moving. And that is a really good mantra for the writer, because the writer has to keep moving. If we stall, then we're in a bad way, right? We get depressed and then we get writer's block. That's what writer's block is. And it's just a question of continuing the process, and then you will find your way. You definitely will find your way. And believe me, your characters will help you. That's what they're there for. They're going to hold your hand and pull you out of that. And it's going to be awesome. And I felt that. I really felt that in this story. It's really cool.
That's going to be one of my other questions, is how do you overcome your writer's block? What are some of your strategies?
Movement is a big one. And I mean that both in literal and a metaphoric sense. So people get writer's block for various reasons. I tend not to get writer's block. And part of it is because I do all these other things anyway. So I kind of prevent that. One way is, okay, so like I said, the block comes in different ways, and it blocks you in different ways. And usually it's, let's say for a writer, it's a plot point. They can't get beyond that. They're stuck. So my way of going around that is I look to water. So, go around it. Just go around it. Do something else. So I either I still can work on the novel. I edit another scene. I work on another scene. I do some research. I do something else, right? Or I take myself right out of the novel and I go for a walk. I do all the S things that someone suggested, all the S activities: swimming, strolling, steering, as in driving, taking a shower, sewing. Is there an S word for cleaning? No.
Sleeping.
So don't bother cleaning, but do other S things, right? And the idea is that you're doing something that's semi-manual, that uses your brain in an easy way and gets you into that zone, which ironically is a place where you troubleshoot. And next thing you know, you'll come up with a plot item. I love to go for drives in the country. I just moved up to the Kawarthas, where there's a bazillion lakes out here and there's tons of snow and there's these country roads that lead nowhere and you have no idea where they go. And I just jump in the car and I drive. And I'm driving and I'm looking out at the scenery and all these things. And next thing you know, my brain is working through something. And then I need to drive home real fast and start writing. And it works every time. So that's sort of, I guess, in a nutshell, what I do. Some people listen to music, others go to movies. Funnily enough, for me, the writing process is very, I don't know how to call it. It's intermingled with everything else that I do. I mean, I teach writing, I do science, all these things. I'm doing something and I'm using my brain for something and I'm grabbing information and stuff. And I find that when I'm in writing a book, whatever that book is, there's a part of my brain that's switched on that says, keep looking for this stuff. Keep looking for anything that's important about that. And I find this kind of synchronicity happens. It's really bizarre. I'll look at some sign and it'll mean something. I'll hear someone say something. Someone will pass me an article. All these things will have something that's important that has to do with my book, and it'll help me. So it's kind of my magic road toward bypassing bypassing
Inspiration
writer's
happens
block.
when you
Yeah,
don't expect it, right?
when you don't expect it, when you're not looking for it. Funnily enough, it's hard to say that to someone because they'll just want to smack you, right? Because they're going, well, that doesn't help me.
No, but
but it helped.
I have been in that situation. I don't write creatively, but I write a lot for work, like technical writing, and just trying to work through a problem in general where it's like I can stare at it all day long and drive myself crazy to the point where I'm stumped. I have no idea what to do. And then I say, you know what, I need to walk away from it, and I come back. And miraculously, the words come out, or the solution is right there. And I'm like, wow, that was easy.
It's
you just
beautiful,
gotta walk away
isn't
from it sometimes. Yeah.
Yep. And you know, it's good for you all around because it gets you up off your duff and give you a little exercise. I mean, we sit at our computers for far too long. And, you know, the funny thing is the things that are good for us spiritually tend to be good for us mentally, tend to be good for us physically, and all around it goes, right? Things that are good for us physically are good for us spiritually, good for us mentally. And it kind of, it's a holistic thing, and it kind of works together. So that's why, I mean, so writer's block simply means you're far too focused and you're stuck. So just get out of that funk and just move out of it. And
I just love listening to you talk. Like, you're such a person, and you have so much joy and energy. Like, spiritually, I can feel you through this
thank you.
call. But yeah, you're an amazing person, and I really enjoyed the book, and I look forward to your future books. And I think we can really sense your again, your true passion, and you really are enjoying every moment of all of the things that you do. So
thank you so
for
much.
sharing your
thank
talent.
you, Jen. Wow, I'm gonna blush. Good thing this is a podcast.
Ditto to everything Jen said.
Yeah. Well,
So
do we have time to talk about this one weird thing that just is really inspired me with this book? Do we have time?
Yeah, I have a couple of more questions. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, you asked about what inspired the book. Well, I told you more or less. But in my research, somewhere in there, I discovered this weird phenomenon, and it's literally driven. It has driven the book. So it's an acronym, NWAPA. Have you gals heard about that? It stands for North America Water Power Alliance. So this was a plan drawn up in 1964 by Parsons Company, and Army Corps of Engineers were involved. And it received a favorable review by Congress for completion in the 1990s. Okay, the plan was to literally collect pretty much all the water, almost all the water, of BC and Yukon in a series of dams, canals, and tunnels to divert all that water into a major reservoir in the Rocky Mountain Trench. And this reservoir would be like 800 kilometers long, which is about 500 miles. And would span a huge area and literally drown entire cities, including Prince George. It was a big city. A lot of people lived there, and amazing stuff. And they would run it across the Rockies and then down into Dakota, etc., and basically to the breadbasket of the states there, and literally rehydrate the states. And it went through, this is the key, the weird thing, it went through Congress. It was favorable. People have been favorable. Canadians were even, some of them were. And then finally, the environmental people said, what, are you crazy? Are you crazy? And put a stop to it. But this plan has come back, and it's back. It is back. There are politicians who are who are pushing it right now. And there are a bazillion videos out there and websites devoted to it. So it hasn't gone away. There are some major diversion projects elsewhere in the world like this one. This isn't the only one. There was a major one in Russia. I can't remember what it's called. There's also Egypt and a couple of other places where, and even Italy, where major plans to divert literally huge amounts of water from one section to another were proposed. The problem, of course, with all these is the environmental damage that would occur, and the senseless lack of compassion of what's going on with the people and the environments and communities there and wildlife, etc. But the reason I bring it up is because it's still being discussed. It is now being discussed more than ever, just in the last 5 years or so. And I made it a reality in my book.
Yeah, it's a terrifying prospect. And, I read years ago the book Cadillac Desert.
Yes.
And I'm sure you know the book,
Yes.
but it's been a while and I don't remember, everything about it, but the gist of it is that we don't need to be in the west of the US because there's not enough water to support people, and we shouldn't be settling in places like that because we're diverting all these, rivers and places that are just too dry, and we're doing it so people can have green grass instead of settling near the water or just adjusting our lifestyle so that we don't need as much water. We're forcing the water to come to us and destroying the environment, which is just unconscionable.
Yeah, the movie Chinatown by Robert Town was based on something similar, right? LA taking all the water from the I forget the area, the aquifer where the farmers were, and drying it out for farming, and bringing that water to LA just to feed people so that they could have their swimming pools and drink their water. And of course they have to drink their water, but do they have to live in the desert, like you say, that many people? So it's a reverse way of thinking, and that's exactly the kind of thinking that needs to change, and that's difficult to do, very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just had to bring that up because it's a key issue that again, it's on the issue that hinges on how we look at the world. It comes back to our worldview. We talked about this in the last session and I brought in Robin Wall Kimmerer and her worldview. And she has a wonderful way of expressing it in her books, Braiding Sweetgrass and Gathering Moss. And she's being interviewed here and there all over the place, which is great because that worldview needs to come to the fore. And she's very eloquent, and she is an Indigenous person. So an eloquent Indigenous person speaking to this worldview that we really need to learn to embrace, that can help us shift from this othering and this bully tactic type approach to life and living, and live more kindly on this earth. Gosh, we need more of that. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe Biden.
I know.
I'm so glad Joe's in.
So are we.
Yeah, I know you are.
Yeah. You took that concept kind of to its extreme, a more extreme conclusion there with this book, and we got to see, like you said, a fifth of the nation or the world's fresh water being diverted to the US and China, and yet there still wasn't enough, right? It was still being squandered and being mismanaged, and then like the rations they were putting on the water for people in Canada, and they went from having indoor plumbing to having public taps, which it's like we are regressing now, because when we got indoor plumbing, that was like a technological feat.
Truly,
within 2 centuries it's already gone. Or that was an incredible.
Yeah, it's a scary thing, but it's to be honest, it's a possibility. It's a real possibility. And I think that's what made that book scary, is that I based it on realities. All those things that I put in there have occurred or are occurring somewhere. And it may not be occurring in Canada right now, but given the right scenario, it could. It actually could. And I think that's what makes it scary, because it's scaffolded on real precedent, and that's something we have to watch for. You know, it's Santayana who said, "Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it." I know I didn't say it quite right, but essentially, who remain ignorant are doomed to repeat the same mistakes that were made earlier and not to learn from them. And we have to keep our freedom and to keep our integrity, we really have to be vigilant. And that's, if anything, the last couple of weeks with politics and what's been happening, I think we've got that message pretty clear.
Yeah. Growing up in Texas, we're taught water is the next oil. And so that kind of like made it home to a lot of folks that own land. You know, we have a lot of farmers or ranchers in our state, and, you know, they have rivers that are on their property and they don't have the water rights to use it. And so it is a very real thing for
yes.
people's livelihoods here. And so I think if you talk to the folks that, you know, are dealing with that on the ground, it's a very real issue that we're dealing with here in Texas and across the U.S. as well.
Yeah, and in Colorado, and I don't know all the other states where they're not allowed to collect rain. It's the same thing, same concept in a different way, though. Where again, because they don't own the water, the water is owned by the government or whatever. So people aren't really allowed to collect water, like in a cistern or something like that, even, because they make allowances, but they've got that law in there. But when you look at it just strictly from, the naked truth of it, that says water, you can't collect water, which is a sort of a presumed a God-given right to live. And it belongs to someone else. And of course, in my book, it belongs to Canada Corp. Canada Corp owns everything, by the way. So water utilities in my book, the water utility, you mentioned gold, right? Water's like gold. So anything to do with water is going to have, if it doesn't already have, much power. Water is, and water being owned or controlled, water control is much more powerful than people believe. And there are, of course, water wars all over the world. They may be couched as religious wars or territorial wars to do with other things. But if you look at it closely, they often have to do with water. So we are in for some interesting times. We already are in them. It's bizarre.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me the most about this book was that it happens not too far in the future. I mean, it starts out 20, 25 years in the future. And by the end of the, the diary, we're still in our lifetime. It's not most, sci-fi books kind of, hundreds of years ago this happened, but no, we're seeing like society deteriorate very quickly in this book.
Yeah.
And
well, I think you're going to find that's the case with climate change. To get back to that topic, overall topic, we are actually seeing the result of tipping points being hit. And so we're seeing this kind of exponential curve of effect. And we're seeing it right now with articles being published with the ice melt and the double, triple, fivel, is that a word? Effect? No, it's 5 times effect of the permafrost melt and methane in the atmosphere. So instead of it's showing up as a linear effect, we're seeing an exponential effect because it's cumulative. And so it's deteriorating much more quickly. So what you and I are going to see, you guys particularly are going to see in your lifetimes, is going to be much more drastic than what I've seen in my lifetime. And my lifetime isn't over just yet, but that's the scary part, is the rate. And that's what someone else had said, another scientist said, it's not so much that CO2 is going up, it's the rate at which it's going up, or the rate of warming, that is going to be much more destructive, because it's going to hit more tipping points and create this cascade, this ecological cascade. Yeah, so it takes place, the novel starts in, I guess she recorded in, I can't remember the year.
2045, I think.
2045.
On my birthday, April 12th.
There you go. Oh, is that right? April 12th? What?
That's how
April 12th is your birthday? That's cool. It's
yeah.
the coolest day. That's the coolest day. Guess what? It's my birthday too.
No way.
Yes way. That's why I chose it.
Birthday twins.
Happy birthday, girl. That's perfect, Jen.
Wow.
Yeah, so it goes from there till 65, something like that, right? And then it jumps to the future with Keo, but in that 20-year period, you see the kind of change that it's actually not outlandish. It makes sense. It's a possibility.
Yeah, as she was writing about all the things happening in the world, but then she would write about these things that were still normal, like her daughter's coming home from school with a project, or I was riding my bike to work. I'm like, how is society still functioning? And all these
isn't that
disasters
wild?
are happening.
But that's the way it's going to be. That's the way it
always
has been. You think to yourself, how did those people live? How did they live during the war, during the Second World War, the First World War, during these other major disastrous times? And they just did, right? They just walked around it, lived with it. I mean, we're still living with amazing terrorism and oppression and war and violence and all kinds of things happening. I mean, we're living with this pandemic right now. We've lived with a pandemic for over a year now, because it started for most people close to a year, in March of last year for lockdown. And what a different way to live. And yet there we are. Like you say, we're walking our dogs, and, we're doing various things and complaining about school and stuff like that. And it's just this regular world. I think, to go back to the diary, this is also why I wrote it as a diary, to do just what you said, Jen, to bring out that normalcy in an abnormal world. Right now we're dealing with this, we're grappling with the idea of what normal is. What is normal? Because we're not in normal. But then what will there ever be a normal? And if there will be, how will we define it? How do you define normal? And the example that I always think of is the diary of Anne Frank. If you read her diary all the way through, pretty much, it's just regular stuff. School, boyfriends, this and that, the problem with the neighbors. But there's this underlying tension with the other stuff, right? That's going to affect her, is coming in more and more here and there, but it's almost hidden. Most of her diary is just about regular stuff. But when you're reading it, and you of course know the backstory, so you read in much more. It gets prickly, harrowing, does it not? Even though she's just talking about normal stuff. And that's the effect I wanted to have with this diary. And I suspect that's exactly what.
Yeah, there's a sense of foreboding, because it's like, you know what's coming.
Yeah. So within that normal life. But, it also speaks to our resilience, though. And this is, again, where the hope comes in, and our ability to to be normal in abnormal conditions. And that in itself is almost heroic in its own way, just to have joy and to joke and to have family together. Well, with the pandemic, even that's difficult, right? But we do that. I talk to my son on Skype almost not daily because he's a busy boy, but we still connect. But to be able to draw on that from, and I guess family is a big one, and this is also what is perhaps at the core of this story, is the idea of family and generations, right? It's 4 generations of women connected to each other in some way, and how we can draw strength from that. I think that's key. That's an important part of it as well, that we can do that. And that this is what being human is about, hopefully, right? It is. We can be strong and weak.
Like caring about the next generation is really why we're worried about all of these topics to begin with.
Truly.
Jennifer and I have children, but we do have friends and family, that do have young children. And so you think about their future and what this world is gonna be about. So I did appreciate that you had that in the book, is that connection to the future and past generations, and making sure that the place we call home is going to be one that we want to live in.
Exactly. Well, very well said. Very well said, Jennifer. When I was asked by Toronto Star, interviewed me and asked me 2 questions about climate change. I think I mentioned this in a previous interview. And they said, what are you scared of? What keeps you awake at night about that? And my answer was just that. It was that my son won't have a normal life because of it, won't have the same, to be able to enjoy the beauty of the world in a world where he felt comfortable, that he could do what he needed to do and raise his family, looking forward to the future. That was my biggest fear for my son, that he would have a good life. And that's what we do when we have family. I mean, that's what family is all about. Honestly, isn't that why we have family? I mean, in a way, it's not just we make more of ourselves, but it's part of I think it's in our DNA, it's in our biology, is to move to the future by producing more of ourselves. And it's not so much more of ourselves, it's producing a future for humanity, for the human race. And that's one gorgeous way of doing it, because when we do things, when we do heroic things, we are certainly doing it for humanity, but we are really doing it for our loved ones. If you're going to be heroic, you're going to be doing it for, more than likely, someone that you love. And now I can't remember who the original quote was, but it was Itzhak Stern in that gorgeous movie. If you save one life, you save the entire human race by focusing on one life, because of how it relates to the larger picture. It's metaphoric, but it's also literal. And Schindler's List, that's the movie that it's from. Itzhak Stern. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is a good segue to my next question, speaking of the future of the human race. And this is sort of spoilery, but I'll try not to give too much away. You had an interesting story arc about how humanity kind of evolves and adapts to our new changing world. And I'm interested to hear how much of that is actually possible
real?
Or based in science, or was that something that you came up with, or a little of both? Because that was a new concept for me. And we know that there's organisms that can kind of clone or have asexual reproduction, but the thought of that happening in humans it's pretty intriguing and interesting.
Yeah. Well, you said it right. That's more or less where fiction started, because at this stage right now, it's very it's not even uncommon, it's unlikely that that would occur without some major intervention. And even with major intervention, would it be likely? Because there's too many triggers, there's too many things that have to happen, that have to be created for that to happen spontaneously like that. So I took a big leap there. But given that, a lot of the other stuff that provides precedence for it, such as the syndrome, the infertility, the growing infertility, mostly with males, and all this kind of stuff, is all based on fact. And those stats are real, and they are alarming. Infertility is on the rise. People just don't realize. Men particularly are kind of doing this. I just put my hands to my eyes and my ears.
But we still are so overpopulated. Is the crazy thing, you know. I don't want to sound crass, but I almost wonder, is that nature's way of trying to kind of balance, you know, what she could support is there's definitely
that theory going around that, you know, and I think I touched upon that with the other organisms, with some of the things that Daniel said. He's an amazing character too, isn't he? He's a little rascal. Anyway, it's like climate change. So if we try and understand climate change through one lens, we will never understand it. We will never understand the complexities that make climate change what it is. And it's like, again, it's like that quote, and again, I've forgotten his name. Am I a paradox? Do I what's the word? Conflict with myself? That's fine. I'm a paradox. I'm large. I'm complex. And I really messed up that quote. The point being that complex things have paradox in them. Paradox is embedded in complexity. So climate change is full of paradox, which is why all those climate deniers, you know, they'll go down south somewhere and into court and put up a snowball and say, see, there's no, you know, it's not getting, there's no global warming. It snowed. It just snowed today. They're not seeing the big picture, the complexity. They're just seeing one thing and they're beelining toward that. And this is the problem with complexity in science, like what we're talking about here. There are so many facets to it. So it almost paradoxes itself. There's a better word than that. But yeah, I can't think of it. It's getting late. What time is it? Anyway, so in order to understand it, just like with climate change, literally again, I forget the fellow's name, Conrad, is it Lawrence? His first name wasn't Conrad, came up with complexity theory, chaos theory, to be able to explain climate. And it's the same thing with biology, biological phenomena that have many ticking points, genetics and microbiology. And there are so many things involved. You can't just focus on one thing. So I took advantage of that in my book to create, it's almost like conspiracy theory. We could talk about conspiracy theory, taking advantage of that too, because it does. Oh,
we have enough of those in the
States. We're not, okay, we won't go there. But anyway, it was literally a light conspiracy theory in that I took advantage of the complexities to create a scenario that was very believable. And because the reason it was believable, just like with conspiracy theory, is because it took a little truth out of each thing and cobbled it together into a larger truth. And it was like cheating, because that's what happens with conspiracy theory, is that that little truth is only the little truth out of a bigger phenomenon. And if you don't include the context of that, then you create something different. And that's what they're always doing, to be honest, is they're misrepresenting the large because they cherry pick what is convenient to them. For a novelist, that
works great.
Gold mine. That's a gold mine. I just love looking at all that stuff. I can't tell you how many, no, I haven't. I was going to say how many things I've taken from that. No, but I do my own conspiracy theory stuff. And in a way it is. And in fact, as you know, Daniel is a bit of a conspiracy theorist himself, and he brings in some of these things. And then he and Lina have these discussions, right? Based on her being a traditional scientist and him being a little bit woo-woo. He's willing to look outside of science for some of his answers.
Yeah, that was what struck me, like you said, is that, this seems like it could kind of be, I could see it happening, like nature evolves, and usually it doesn't evolve this quickly, but sometimes, it
for sure
leapfrogs over a few thousand years, and maybe
it leaps forward. Yeah.
Maybe we could do that if our species was threatened enough, because we're ruining the planet and we have to adapt to it versus, fixing the planet. We just fix ourselves, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, some of that might indeed be true and possible, maybe just not that timeline, or maybe not in this direction, this way, but in other ways, yes. Because we see so many examples of bizarrities in nature, things that have happened that we wouldn't expect to happen. And there are so many links, and evolution occurs in so many bizarre ways. We really don't understand an awful lot yet. We think we do. We've decided we have, but there's still much to learn. An example is epigenetics. Up until, I don't know, maybe even just 10 years ago, most people didn't even know what epigenetics was. Scientists knew about it maybe 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, I don't know. But it was like down there. And it was not seen as playing the kind of role that it plays now, for sure not, in terms of determining evolutionary steps. It was traditional genetics through hereditary genetics, right, through DNA. The traditional DNA movement. Whereas epigenetics, which is the effect of the environment on not so much the structure of DNA, but how DNA, not the component of DNA, but how DNA structures, like things that switch on and off. Now we find that epigenetics plays a huge role in anything from animal behavior to the ability to inherit a trait. I mean, that's incredible. So this is now, we're seeing the environment playing a much more obvious and important role in determining changes in species, in what species do, how they behave, how they look, etc. So we're still learning.
Yeah, and I have to say thank you for inserting all the little quotes and scientific blurbs at the beginning of each entry, because it kind of forced us to learn some science. So you snuck that in there.
Okay, I did. And I have to say, I love Wetzel. Most of them
I like him too, because
Wetzel.
his name rhymes with my last name. So
that's right. And your birthday is my birthday.
That's right, man.
Oh my gosh.
It's all coming together.
It is. It's all aligning, right?
Yep.
Well,
Jen, did you have any other last minute questions or thoughts or?
Just reiterating, I truly appreciate the time with you. Your zest for life is just refreshing, and I hope all of us can achieve to be like you when we grow up.
Oh.
That fresh Canadian water up there.
Oh no, we don't want too many Ninas out there. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been wonderful, you guys. You ask gorgeous questions. You have a great show here. It's doing important work, and I'm just so pleased to be on this show with you.
Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on and giving us so much to think about. And this was a great story, and I highly encourage, if you're listening and you haven't read it, check it out. It's available on Amazon, I know, but any other places you want to plug it?
Yeah, major bookstores, Amazon for sure. Any Amazon. Amazon's all around the world. .com, .ca in Canada, Germany, Switzerland, wherever you go, where there's an Amazon. It's on Kobo. It's various other bookstores, Chapters in Canada, Barnes and Noble in the States. It's available through the publisher, Inanna Publications. Gorgeous publisher. They work out of York University in Toronto. So you can get it straight from them. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Well, and do you want to give, I guess, a shout out to some of your other works? Because I know you have at least one other cli-fi book, and you have a few others that are already published. So you want to tell the reader or the listeners kind of a brief synopsis, I guess, or what those are about?
How much time do we have? Okay, well, A Diary in the Age of Water, that's the book we're talking about today, well, there will be a sequel to it. I'm not going to give the name yet, and I'm not going to say anything else about it because it's really cool and I want it to be a secret. But prior to this book, you mentioned cli-fi. Well, sort of, the other books are more, they are sort of environmental books, but I wouldn't call them cli-fi. I have a trilogy, which is really a fun trilogy. But it's space opera. It's the Splintered Universe, and that's a kick-ass detective lady called Rhea Hawk with major issues. She's she's very prejudiced. She works for an alien race of regulators. They're the regulators of the galaxy, if you will. The galactic police force, and she's the only human. She's this puny little human, and they're these giant people. They're 7-8 foot people, and she hates them. And she works for them. So she has this, that's where she's coming off. She's really got a lot of attitude. So she has to save the world, of course, and in so doing, she has to runs across some major issues, major things that are going on. That's all I'm going to say about that book. Those 3 books. They will be available as audiobooks, and they are incredibly well read by the narrator that the company hired, a professional narrator. Her name is Dawn Harvey, a voice artist out of Calgary, and she does Rhea Hawk just beautifully. And what she does, as like a good voice artist does, she actually acts. She acts. So the voices will change according to who's talking and whatever's going on. It's a first person book, so it's all Rhea talking, but then she has dialogue with other people. And there are aliens in this book, other aliens, obviously. And one alien has a multi-timbral voice because it's actually got 5 different mouths to talk out of. And Dawn achieved this. She achieved all these, and another one has a slurpy voice because he's looks sort of like an amoeba, and he kind of talks out of one side of his sort of mouth that whatever. Anyway, she's amazing. It's so fun to listen to the book. It's
a good narrator can make or break a book if you're listening. Because I've listened to a few fiction books, and if they don't have the right narrator, it's like,
yep,
ooh, this
I
is
agree.
Tough.
That's really good advice. If you don't have a really good narrator, don't do it at all. It's better off without. Yeah. But what she does, she actually improves the book. I swear to you, she improves the book. But yes, to go back to cli-fi, I have a duology that takes place also in Toronto, and that's Darwin's Paradox. And prior to that is Angel of Chaos. And both of them take place in Toronto after a catastrophic event has made people all go inside. And so they're living in a broken environment. And it's a bit of a techno thriller because the AI community is basically taken over the city, and there's a plague that's related to their living inside. That's an environmental plague that they've got to figure out a way of getting around that. So there's a lot of intrigue there. And yeah, I'd forgotten about that. It's cli-fi. Other books, I also write nonfiction. I wrote a series of books, the Alien Guidebook series, which are writing guides that I use in my courses that I teach, writing courses that I teach, the Alien Guidebook series. And the first one is about writing fiction, The Fiction Writer, get published right now. Then there's one on writing diaries, on journals. It's called The Journal Writer, Finding Your Voice. And then the last one, which I just put out last year, 2 years ago, sorry, is The Ecology of Story, World as Character. So again, it's more about fiction writing, but it's based on setting and place. So it's all about how the writer needs to pay attention to where the story is occurring and how that place itself can be a character. So it's making that big giant step of treating place as character, which is very cool. So, and then my latest nonfiction is, of course, about water. It's my grand piece, I guess, as a limnologist, a book that I think I talked about this earlier, that I've always wanted to write as a limnologist. I thought I would write a textbook for people about water, for regular folk who aren't scientists, about water. That's not a textbook. And Water Is came from that. And it's essentially 12 chapters. Each chapter provides an angle or a perspective on water. And I bring in a lot of experts from all over the world in there. But the perspectives are weird because it's not just the scientist's perspective. It starts off with things like science, flow, life. Water is life. Water is flow. It answers that question. Water is magic. But then it gets kind of weird. It goes, water is frequency, water is rhythm, water is joy, water is wisdom, prayer, those kind of cool things.
Sounds kind of familiar, like a book we just read. A lot of that sounds like.
Yeah, well, see, I brought a lot of that in there. So I've been thinking water for a while, not just as a limnologist for the past 20 years, but more to do with as a person, as a mother, as a human being, as a community member. And water is, we talked about water being a major phenomenon in climate change. Water really plays a major role in everything. And I mean, we don't realize that this is a thing. Water is everywhere. You're breathing water right now. You're breathing in water and breathing it out. And I make this example with kids that I talk to kids in school about water. I go to classrooms and chat about water and its importance and all that kind of stuff. They're just so fun. I love kids. Anyway, so I tell them, I say, okay, look at the person beside you. Who's sitting beside you? And you're breathing their water. And they're breathing your water. And first, some of them, they go, ooh, ooh, right?
You'll put on a mask.
It's COVID. Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking that now with COVID, that is so real. So again, it depends on the grade, right? If it's grade 8, if it's grade 12, it's different. If it's grade 6, it's different again. And then I say, take it a step further. So where's that water coming from? So there's water vapor in the air. There's far more water vapor than you even realize. It's enough water vapor I think there's enough water vapor to literally occupy all the surface water that we have. So but it's just all in the air and it's invisible. Where are you getting that water from? Where are you breathing it in? Where is it coming from? Well, it's coming from the nearest water body that's evaporating off. So we live here near Toronto. In Toronto, we live right next to Lake Ontario. So I say, that's your water. That's you. Lake Ontario is you, and you're Lake Ontario. So I make that connection, right? And that usually clicks with people. in some way, and it adds a perspective that most people don't have. And I kind of enjoy doing that.
So Jen, that means you are Lake Belton.
There you are.
She lives right on the lake.
Yeah. So think of the water body that you're next to. And then my next thing usually is I say, are you looking after it? Because are you looking after your water? That's your water. Are you looking after it? Do you have a campaign going on? Are you cleaning up the shore? Are you, talking with your community, blah, blah, blah. And then it gets people going. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, Nina, thank you so much for talking with us tonight and sharing this great story with us. And if folks want to find you online and, connect with you, where can they do that?
I have a couple of websites. They usually have my name in there. So there's ninamunteanu.me is my coaching site and my writing site. I have a lot of useful articles on there, and my coaching is on there too if anyone's interested in writing, and my coaching services. ninamunteanu.ca has everything to do with my writing and my appearances, mostly my writing and stuff. And then I also have two other sites. One is called The Meaning of Water, themeaningofwater.com. And that's everything to do with water, as well as my books on water. I have a lot of articles there on the environment, things to do with water, water issues, very interesting stuff. I spend a lot of time there. And then there's The Alien Next Door, which is my personal site of pop culture and my own crazy thoughts. And I just, that's the blog that I started with many, many years ago when blogging was just new. So I'm not going to tell you when that started. It was a long time ago. Otherwise, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. You can just look me up, my name usually, or The Alien Next Door. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on Instagram because I can't use Instagram. I use a computer, not an iPhone. And where else am I? Oh, various places. You can find me on Amazon as well. I have my own author site there. And that's where you'll find all my books.
Great. And Jen, I think you're still exclusive to Sustainably Geeky, correct?
Yes, you can find me here at Sustainably Geeky.
And we all need to be sustainably geeky.
Yes, please.
We do.
And you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be Me. And you can find the show on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well at Sustainably Geeky. And then we're on all of the podcast sites. So look us up, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, tell your mom you love us, share us, all that good stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, every little bit helps. We appreciate you getting the word out. So thanks again, Nina. And for those listening, have a great rest of your day.